Welcome to Fearless Podcasting Academy, where next week we'll be in a different place because we're actually moving this weekend. So trying to film and move and do all the things that we need to do around filming. But that leads me into the perfect topic today, which is all about consistency and evergreen content, and maybe not having to podcast because you didn't do some evergreen content or you're out of evergreen content while you're in a move. That can be difficult. But it's when you hit those little bumps in the road, if you get sick, if you're moving, if life happens, and if you don't have anything in the can, evergreen, your consistency can hit a road bump, and that can derail your podcast. You may find that you just can't get back on it. You don't know what you're doing. You've lost your momentum. You've lost your steam. You've lost listeners. Who knows what happens when life happens? That is what we're going to talk about this week. Welcome to Fearless Podcasting Academy. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Dean. I've always lived in two worlds, one filled with the magic of storytelling and language, and the other wired with technology and innovation. And through the years of research and teaching and hands-on experience, I've been obsessed with one question: what makes a message truly resonate? And that's why I created the Fearless Podcasting Academy, where creators and entrepreneurs and change makers come to ditch self-doubt, amplify their voices, and build podcasts that demand attention. So whether you're launching your first episode or leveling up your platform, you're in the right place. Because when you learn to use your voice with confidence, you don't just start a podcast, you start a movement. This is Fearless Podcasting Academy. So consistency isn't just a virtue in podcasting. It is the heartbeat of your show's success. And today we're tackling one of the biggest challenges podcasters face: creating and maintaining a sustainable content calendar that keeps your show fresh and keeps you from burning out. So whether you've been podcasting for years or you're just getting started, you've probably felt that tension between creative inspiration and the relentless demand for new content or new episodes. By the end of today's session, though, you're going to have some practical strategies for balancing evergreen and timely content and a framework for planning that adapts to real life, because your podcast should enhance your life and not consume it. So let's dive in and build a content strategy that's both ambitious and sustainable. So let's talk first about the sustainability paradox. Here is a truth that experienced podcasters rarely talk about: consistency and sustainability. That often feels like opposing forces, right? When I launched my first podcast, I was so committed to consistency that I found myself, no joke, I found myself recording episodes at midnight, editing during my lunch breaks, and stressing about content when I should have been present with my family and with my friends. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there right now. Consistency came at the cost of sustainability, and that made me quit. That makes a lot of people quit. But consistency without that sustainability, that is a recipe for burnout. And burnout is the number one podcast killer I see among talented and passionate creators. But there is some good news here. This is a solvable problem, and it starts with understanding what I call the sustainability paradox. The more sustainable your podcasting practice, the more consistent you can ultimately be, even if it means temporarily being inconsistent while you build up systems. So I want you to think about it this way. Would you rather release episodes weekly for 3 months before burning out completely, or release episodes every other week for years, building a loyal audience over time? The podcasters who succeed long-term aren't necessarily the ones who never miss a week. They're the ones who create sustainable systems that allow them to remain consistent with their energy and not just consistent in their calendar. So I'm going to talk about a framework that has transformed how my clients approach content planning. It is called the 3 Horizons model. Okay, Horizon 1 is your immediate focus. What are your next 4 episodes? Horizon 2 is what are your next 3 months of themes? What is that mid-range planning? And Horizon 3 would be your annual content direction, your long-term vision. Where are you going with this thing? Now, let's actually map this out together. Let's say you host a wellness podcast, right? Let's look at Horizon 1. What are your next 4 episodes? That could be meditation basics, breath work for beginners, interview with a yoga instructor, stress relief techniques, anything that's your next couple of episodes. But then we want to look at Horizon 2. What is the next 3 months going to look like? It could be building daily wellness habits. Now, what goes into those 3 months? How do I get my client from point A, I want to do yoga, I want to do wellness, I don't know what to do with these things, to end of 3 months, oh, I've got a routine here. I know what I'm going to do. And then horizon 3 will be that annual vision. Where am I going with this thing? Again, going back to the wellness example, it could be empowering listeners to create personalized wellness routines. So by the end of the year, they have got their own personalized routine. See how this gives you both a focus, but also some flexibility? So for an action step, I want you to grab a notebook, a Google Doc, or just open, Trello or Asana, and I want you to jot down your next 4 episode ideas. Then think about a theme that you would love to explore over the next quarter. Finally, I want you to write a one sentence mission for your podcast for this year. You can use Trello, you can use Notion. Honestly, I stick sticky notes everywhere. I have got my serial killer wall of sticky notes up that I have connected the dots, and that's how I map out what my podcast is going to look like from point A, beginning of the year, to point 365 at the end of the year. By working across these 3 horizons, you break free from the panic of what am I going to be publishing next week, and you start steering your podcast with intention. This prevents that exhausting cycle of scrambling for ideas at the last minute, but also keeps your content aligned with your evolving goals. So the next thing I want you to think about is how to balance evergreen and timely content. So one of the most powerful techniques for a sustainable content calendar when you plan strategically is strategically balancing evergreen and timely content. Evergreen content stays relevant for years. It always is timely. It is always important. It is always something that is a fundamental. You can think about step-by-step tutorials or timeless principles of whatever the topic of your podcast is. Timely content, on the other hand, captures current trends, responds to industry news, or addresses seasonal topics. For example, I used to teach film and video at university, and our big conference for university teachers of this thing was every year in Vegas in April. We would all go out there and we would share what we're doing and how we could do it better, and we would have industry professionals there. It was a big deal. That is the kind of thing that if I were covering that, if that was the topic of this podcast, would be a great thing to go and interview people and talk about it and get stuff on the floor, because there was a big NAB was there, which is the National Broadcasting Association. So you could show the newest technology in the broadcast field. There were so many different ways that you could incorporate that conference into your evergreen. So if you interviewed someone at the conference, that would be timely because it was from the conference, but it could be evergreen because you're talking about fundamentals or a teaching methodology or something like that. So it's a great way to bring in and to mix those things. So do you see what the difference is now? Evergreen does not lose its needles. It's good pretty much any time. And timely would be something that's like an algorithm changed if you're talking about a different, platform, or a new technology that has just come out, or a conference, or something that is of the moment. That's the difference between evergreen and timely. So how does this work in practice? Let's say you host a podcast about digital marketing. Your evergreen episodes may cover topics like email marketing fundamentals, or a customer journey, how they went from point A to point B, or core copywriting principles, or audience research methodologies. There's so much there. Your timely content, however, might include something like an analysis of a platform's recent algorithm change, or an interview with an author who just released a relevant book. So here's where the sustainability magic happens. Evergreen content can be batched far in advance, and that gives you some breathing room in your schedule to respond to timely opportunities. Whereas a timely opportunity is of the moment, right? I recommend scheduling timely content strategically throughout your calendar if you can. For example, if you release weekly episodes, you might designate the first episode of each month as your trend analysis slot. This creates a predictable rhythm while giving you some flexibility too. So I want you to take a moment to consider, what is your ideal ratio of evergreen to timely content? What topics would fill each category for your podcast? I want you to open your content calendar, whether that's a Google Calendar, an Airtable, Notion, a paper planner, and then I want you to color code it. Blue for evergreen, red for timely. I want you to plot your next 8 episodes using a 70-30 ratio. 70% evergreen to 30% timely. So let me give you a pro tip here. I want you to use predictable events for your timely content. Think about things like we mentioned earlier, industry conferences, or awareness months, or seasonal trends, or an annual product launch. All of those things are timely, but they're predictable. For example, if you're in wellness, you could say Whole30 in January is a gold mine of content. Every year, people are going to be doing Whole30 in January. Now, let me give you a really great hack for evergreen/timely hybrids. You want to create an episode about a current trend and what that teaches us about an evergreen principle. This way, when the trend fades, your episode still has value. So let me give you an action step. I want you to build your timely trigger list, 5 recurring events in your niche that you can always plan for. This simple system keeps you relevant without running on this hamster wheel of constant trend chasing. Okay, one of the big questions that I get a lot, but I also see a lot in Facebook podcasting groups is, how do I batch? What are some strategies for batching consistent production, right? So let's talk about the production technique that has transformed my clients' podcasting experience, and that is strategic batching. Strategic batching. Batching is simply grouping similar tasks together to leverage your focus and your momentum. But effective batching for podcasters goes beyond recording multiple episodes in one sitting, because that can be hard, right? It's about designing your entire production flow for efficiency. So here is a comprehensive batching framework that I call the content creation cascade. First, I want you to batch your planning. So rather than planning episodes one at a time, set aside a quarterly planning day where you define your themes for the next 3 months, right? Quarterly. Or you outline episode topics that support those themes, that you identify potential guests or interviews, or you schedule those guests. Next, I want you to batch your research. For each month's episodes, dedicate a single day to gathering statistics and studies, finding relevant stories and examples, and preparing interview questions. Get yourself ready, do your research, create those episode outlines. Then batch record. I recommend recording 4 to 6 episodes in a single day or 2 consecutive half days. This leverages your host energy. You can still smile, you can still have some energy, but also creates a continuous flow state that actually improves your delivery. Finally, batch your promotion. Create a month's worth of social media posts about upcoming episodes, email newsletter content, or even audiograms or video clips. You're going to cross-promote with those different materials on different platforms, so you're not recreating the wheel for every single platform. One of my clients is a therapist with a mental health podcast, and she was struggling to maintain her weekly release schedule alongside her full-time practice, because that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. But by implementing the content creation cascade, she just dedicates 2 days now per month for her podcast, 1 for planning and recording and 1 for promotion. And her result is that the show has been consistently weekly for over a year. Her audience has tripled and her stress level has plummeted because she knows she's got something in the can. But batching only works when you protect those dedicated times. Block them in your calendar as non-negotiable appointments with yourself. When my clients treat their batching days with the same commitment as they would a client meeting or a doctor's appointment, their podcasting practice transforms from stressful to sustainable. You've got to put that time and effort in. You've got to make yourself worth that time and effort and make your podcast worth blocking off and keeping safe. Okay, now it is time for our fearless moment, that new segment that we're doing this season where we confront a fear head on because we are fearless. Today, we're addressing the fear that many podcasters experience but rarely discuss. And that is the fear about being realistic about your capacity. There is this strange pressure in the podcasting world to maintain a relentless publishing schedule, regardless of what is happening in your life or your business. This is unrealistic, and that expectation leads many podcasters to set themselves up for failure with schedules they cannot possibly maintain, and then they quit. They quit. Because if you have come in with me in any of my workshops, you will know that 90% of podcasts fail after 11 episodes. Guess why? Guess why? That is because the consistency is gone. People give up because it is overwhelming and too much. But it is not overwhelming if you batch. It is not. Being fearless in your content planning means having the courage to be honest about your real capacity, not your imagined ideal capacity on your best day. Who the heck are you competing with, right? Only yourself. So I want you to try this exercise. Look at your calendar for the past month. How many hours did you actually have available for podcast production? Not how many you wished you had, but how many did you realistically have or used? And that number minus 20% for life's inevitable interruptions is your true podcast production capability. Building a calendar based on this reality is not settling. It's setting yourself up for sustainable success. You're being realistic. So here's another fearless practice. Build buffer episodes into your calendar. These are completely finished episodes kept in reserve for when life inevitably happens. You might get sick. You may have a family emergency or unexpected opportunities. You never know. One of my clients is a business coach, and she has a leadership podcast that maintains a buffer of 3 episodes at all times. That really came in handy because her father was hospitalized last year, and she was able to be fully present for her family while her podcast continued without interruption. Nobody even knew. That's the peace of mind that comes with fearlessly embracing reality in your planning. Remember, the most successful podcasters are not necessarily those who never miss an episode. They're the ones who design systems resilient enough to weather life's unpredictability. So as we wrap up today's episode on creating a sustainable content calendar, I want to leave you with this thought. Your podcast is a marathon, not a sprint. I know it's cliche, but it's true. The decisions you make about your production schedule today will determine whether you're still sharing your message a year from now. Your homework today, or before our next episode, is to design your ideal content cascade, to identify your batching blocks for the next month, and to protect them in your calendar. Share your plan with our community using the hashtag #FearlessPodcasting, and I will personally respond to as many as I can. Until then, remember, your message isn't just worth sharing once. It is worth sharing sustainably so that you can continue making an impact for years to come. This is Dr. Stephanie Dean from Fearless Podcasting Academy. Thank you for investing in your podcasting journey.